The year was 1918. New Orleans simmered. It was a city of humid air and long, dark nights. Cobblestone streets, slick with moisture, reflected the faint gaslight. The Great War had just ended, soldiers were returning, but peace felt fragile, almost illusory. Another shadow, the Spanish flu, stalked the populace, its presence a constant chilling whisper. The city, a vibrant tapestry of French, Spanish, Creole and American cultures, throbbed with life. Yet beneath the surface of jazz music and lively commerce, a tension coiled. It was a city of stark contrasts where opulent mansions stood not far from crowded, impoverished tenements. This was the New Orleans that awaited an unknown terror. New Orleans possessed a character unlike any other American city. Its architecture spoke of European origins, with intricate ironwork balconies and hidden courtyards. The Mississippi River, a vast muddy artery, pulsed at its edge, bringing goods and people from around the world. This unique blend of cultures created a fertile ground for stories, for music, for an almost palpable sense of history. Superstition and folklore were woven into the daily fabric of life. Voodoo queens and gris-gris charms were as much a part of the city's identity as its famed cuisine. This mystical undercurrent would soon intertwine with a very real, very brutal series of events, adding another layer to the fear. People craved a return to normalcy. The war had taken its toll emotionally and physically. Families longed for simple routines, for laughter to replace the anxiety of casualty lists. The city tried to resume its usual rhythms. The streetcars clattered, the markets bustled, the scent of chicory coffee and beignets hung in the air. But an unease was beginning to settle, like the heavy evening humidity. It was an unspoken fear, a premonition that something was amiss. This feeling would soon crystallize into a name, a legend, a nightmare that would grip the city by its throat. The physical environment of New Orleans seemed almost designed for a predator. The oppressive summer heat often forced residents to sleep with windows open, seeking any breath of air. Many homes, particularly in the less affluent areas, were constructed of wood, their back doors and windows offering flimsy resistance. Streets outside the main thoroughfares were poorly lit, pools of shadow swallowing alleys and doorways. It was a landscape where someone could move unseen, unheard, melting into the darkness. A perfect hunting ground for a killer who would soon earn the terrifying moniker, the Axeman. The stage was set for a drama of blood and fear. The terror began on a May morning, May 23, 1918. Joseph Maggio, an Italian grocer, and his wife Catherine, were the first. They lived above their small shop on the corner of Upper Line and Magnolia Streets. Their brother, Jake Maggio, made the gruesome discovery. He found them in their bed, victims of an unimaginable violence. The scene was one of utter devastation. Blood soaked the linens, the walls, the floor. The air was thick with the metallic scent of it. This was no ordinary crime. This was something savage, something that spoke of a deep, cold rage. The city was about to learn a new kind of fear. The details of the crime chilled investigators to the bone. A panel in the back door had been neatly chiseled out. This was the point of entry. The weapon, an axe, was found in the apartment. It belonged to the Maggios themselves. The killer had used their own tool against them. His face had apparently been covered with a cloth or mask. Catherine's throat had been cut so deeply she was nearly decapitated. Joseph had been bludgeoned repeatedly with the axe. The precision of the entry, contrasted with the frenzied nature of the attack, was deeply unsettling. It suggested a mind both methodical and monstrous. What made the crime even more baffling was the lack of apparent motive. Robbery was quickly ruled out. Money and valuables were left untouched in the apartment. This was not a crime of opportunity or greed. It seemed personal, yet there were no immediate suspects, no clear enemies who would wish such a fate upon the hard-working couple. The Italian immigrant community, to which the Maggios belonged, was thrown into a state of panic. They were hard-working people, often keeping to themselves, now targeted by an unseen foe. Who would do such a thing? And why? New Orleans awoke to headlines screaming of the brutal double murder. Whispers started immediately. Fear, like a cold fog, began to creep through the city streets, particularly in the Italian neighborhoods. Doors were bolted earlier, windows were shuttered tight, despite the suffocating heat. Neighbors looked at each other with suspicion. The police offered assurances, but they had little to go on. The Axeman, though not yet named, had made his first bloody mark. He had announced his presence not with words but with an act of unspeakable violence, setting a pattern that would soon become horrifyingly familiar. The Maggio murders were not an isolated incident. The city soon learned this with dawning horror. Less than a month later, on June 27, another Italian grocer, Louis Basumer, and his common-law wife, Harriet Lowe, were attacked in their home. They lived in a back room of their grocery store. The method was chillingly similar. A panel chiseled out of the back door. An axe, again belonging to the victims, used as the weapon. Both suffered severe head injuries. Basumer, though grievously wounded, would survive. Harriet Lowe, however, succumbed to her injuries a few days later, adding another name to the growing list. The Axeman, as he was now beginning to be called by the press, seemed to move like a phantom through the city. He targeted his victims with an unnerving precision, often choosing Italian grocers or those living in close proximity to them. He knew their homes, their routines. He seemed to understand the vulnerabilities of their wooden houses, the ease with which a backdoor panel could be breached. He left few, if any, tangible clues. Fingerprints were rare. Witnesses were non-existent. He was a shadow, a whisper, a terrifying enigma who struck and then vanished into the humid New Orleans night. The Italian-American community lived under a siege of fear. They were the primary targets and no one knew why. Was it a vendetta? A racist madman? The questions hung heavy in the air, unanswered. Families barricaded themselves in their homes. Men took turns standing guard through the long dark nights, armed with whatever weapons they could find. Sleep became a luxury few could afford. Every creak of a floorboard, every unfamiliar sound from outside sent hearts pounding. The city's vibrant Italian culture, usually so full of life and music, was now muted by an oppressive dread. The New Orleans Police Department found itself completely baffled. They were dealing with a new breed of killer, one who seemed to kill without a clear motive, without leaving a trail. They pursued every lead, interviewed countless individuals, but the Axeman remained elusive. The press sensationalized the crimes, fueling public hysteria. The list of victims grew. Mrs. Schneider, pregnant, attacked in August. Joseph Romano, an elderly man, bludgeoned in his bed. Each attack mirrored the others in its brutal simplicity and terrifying efficiency. The city was paralyzed, caught in the grip of a methodical madness. Then, in the midst of this escalating terror, came the letter. It arrived at the offices of several New Orleans newspapers in March of 1919. It was a communication unlike any the city had ever seen. Penned in a flamboyant, almost taunting style, it claimed to be from the Axeman himself. He addressed the esteemed mortals of New Orleans, his words dripping with arrogance and a chilling self-assurance. This letter would transform the Axeman from a mere brutal killer into a figure of almost supernatural menace, a boogeyman with a bizarre request. In the letter, the author declared himself not human but a demon, an invisible force from the hottest hell. He mocked the efforts of the police, calling them foolish and stupid. He boasted of his ability to remain unseen, to pass through walls, to choose his victims at will. He claimed responsibility for the murders, describing his work with a disturbing relish. The letter was a direct challenge, a slap in the face to the authorities, and a terrifying proclamation to the citizens. It was a calculated move, designed to amplify the fear, to assert his power over the entire city. The most infamous part of the letter, however, was its chilling demand. The Axeman stated that he was very fond of jazz music, therefore he issued an ultimatum. On the following Tuesday night, March 19, 1919, precisely at 12:15 a.m., every home in New Orleans and its surrounding areas must be filled with the sound of jazz. If this condition was met, he would spare the city. If not, he promised to go on another killing spree, choosing his victims at random. He would, he wrote, pass over any person or persons where a jazz band is in full swing. The city was thrown into an uproar. Jazz, the vibrant, soulful music born in the heart of New Orleans, was now inextricably linked to a killer's macabre whim. It was a bizarre, almost surreal demand. Could music truly hold a murderer at bay? Was this the ravings of a lunatic, or a genuine threat from a demonic entity, as he claimed? The newspapers printed the letter in full. Its contents spread like wildfire. The citizens of New Orleans faced a terrifying choice: to comply with the Axeman's strange request or risk becoming his next victim. The ultimatum hung heavy, a dark cloud over the usually festive city. Section 5. The Night Jazz Saved New Orleans, a city's musical vigil. Tuesday, March 19, 1919, arrived with an almost unbearable weight of anticipation. The city held its collective breath. Would the people of New Orleans acquiesce to the Axeman's bizarre demand? Many were skeptical, viewing the letter as a hoax or the ramblings of a deranged individual. Others, however, were gripped by a primal fear. The Axeman had proven himself to be deadly serious. Could they afford to ignore his threat? As dusk began to settle, a strange energy filled the streets. It was a mixture of anxiety, defiance, and a desperate hope that music could indeed be their salvation. As the appointed hour of 12:15 a.m. approached, something remarkable happened. Music began to fill the night air. Tentatively at first, then swelling into a city-wide symphony. From grand dance halls to humble shotgun houses, jazz erupted. Professional bands played with a fervent energy. Amateur musicians dragged out their instruments, their tunes perhaps less polished but no less heartfelt. Those without instruments banged on pots and pans, whistled, sang, or simply turned up their phonographs as loud as they would go. The city became a cacophony of sound, a desperate, noisy prayer offered up to the darkness. The night was unlike any other in New Orleans history. The music was not just for entertainment, it was a shield, a talisman against an unseen evil. Fear was still present, a cold undercurrent beneath the blare of trumpets and the rhythm of drums. But there was also a sense of communal solidarity. People were in this together, facing the unknown with the city's most iconic art form. The normally boisterous streets were strangely subdued in terms of revelry. The music was a serious business this night. It was an act of collective will, a city playing for its life. Dawn broke on Wednesday, March 20th. An eerie silence gradually replaced the night-long concert. People emerged from their homes, tired but alive. They looked at each other, a silent question in their eyes. Had it worked? News spread quickly. There were no new victims. The Axeman had not struck. A wave of profound relief washed over New Orleans. It seemed that jazz, the city's beloved music, had indeed saved them from the killer's blade. Whether the Axeman had been serious or simply playing a psychological game, the outcome was the same. For one night, the music had triumphed over murder. Section 6. Whispers and Accusations, the Hunt and the Aftermath. The city of New Orleans exhaled, a collective sigh of relief rippling through its streets after the night of jazz. But the Axeman was not truly gone, not from their minds at least. The fear, though momentarily abated by the music, lingered like the humid summer air, a persistent, uncomfortable presence. The respite was temporary, a fragile calm before a potential new storm. Residents knew deep down that a killer who had terrorized them for months was unlikely to be deterred forever by a single night of forced revelry. The question remained, when and where would he strike next? In the wake of the jazz night, the city buzzed with whispers and accusations. The police, under immense public and political pressure, intensified their hunt. Suspects were rounded up, often based on flimsy evidence or mere prejudice. The Italian community, already living in fear, found itself under renewed scrutiny. Wild theories circulated. Some believed the mafia was involved, settling old scores under the guise of a madman. Others pointed fingers at individuals known for eccentric behavior, or those who harbored grudges against the victims. Yet, despite numerous arrests and interrogations, no one was definitively linked to the crimes. The Axeman remained a ghost. The failure of the police to capture the Axeman led to widespread frustration and a growing sense of helplessness among the populace. Trust in the authorities eroded with each passing day that the killer remained at large. Some citizens, impatient with the official investigation, began to form vigilante groups. They patrolled their own neighborhoods, armed and wary, determined to protect their families where the police seemingly could not. This atmosphere of suspicion and fear strained the social fabric of the city, turning neighbors into potential suspects and familiar streets into menacing landscapes. The press, eager for updates and often sensationalizing the scant details available, kept the Axeman at the forefront of public consciousness. Every rumor, every minor development in the case was amplified. This constant media attention, while keeping the pressure on investigators, also contributed to the pervasive climate of anxiety. The Axeman, through his crimes and his infamous letter, had managed to hold the entire city hostage, not just physically but psychologically. The aftermath of the jazz night was not one of peace, but of uneasy waiting, of wondering when the silence would be broken by another scream, another brutal attack. Section 7. The Final Chills. Terror resumes and vanishes. The fragile peace bought by the night of jazz did not last. The Axeman, it seemed, was not so easily appeased, or perhaps had never intended to stop. In August 1919, months after the citywide concert, the attacks resumed. Sarah Lohman, a young woman, was found brutally attacked in her home. She survived, but the message was clear. The Axeman was still out there, still capable of striking. The terror, which had receded slightly, returned with a vengeance, sharper and more desperate than before. The city realized with a sinking heart that their musical offering had been, at best, a temporary reprieve. The Axeman seemed to mock their efforts, their hopes, their brief illusion of safety. He remained as elusive and unpredictable as ever. His motives, if any existed beyond a lust for violence, were still shrouded in impenetrable darkness. Following the attack on Lohman, Steve Boca became another victim in September, further cementing the fear that no one was truly safe. Each new crime scene was a horrifying echo of the last: the chiseled door panel, the bloody axe often left behind, the senseless brutality inflicted upon the victims. The city felt trapped in a recurring nightmare, with a demonic figure at its center. The final confirmed attack attributed to the Axeman occurred on the night of October 27, 1919. Mike Pepitone was killed, his wife Cordemelia Pepitone discovering the horrifying scene. She reportedly saw two figures fleeing, but the darkness and her terror made identification impossible. The Pepitone murder bore all the hallmarks of the Axeman's gruesome work. It was a brutal end to his reign of terror, a final, bloody signature. The city braced for more, for the pattern to continue, for the fear to become a permanent fixture of their lives. Then, as suddenly and mysteriously as he had appeared, the Axeman vanished. After the Pepitone murder, the attacks simply stopped. There were no more chiseled doors, no more bloodied axes, no more taunting letters. Silence descended, but it was a different kind of silence than the one that followed the jazz night. This was a silence born of cessation, not of temporary appeasement. Weeks turned into months, and with no new attacks, a cautious hope began to grow. Was he gone for good? Had he died, moved on, or simply decided to end his reign? The city was left with unanswered questions, and the chilling memory of his bloody passage. Section 8. Unmasking of Phantom Theories and Unanswered Questions. Decades have passed since the Axeman's bloody reign over New Orleans. Yet the central question remains stubbornly unanswered. Who was the Axeman? His identity is one of the city's most enduring and chilling mysteries. Numerous theories have been proposed over the years, debated by historians, criminologists, and armchair detectives alike. Each theory attempts to piece together the scant clues, the bizarre behavior, and the specific targeting of victims. However, none have ever been definitively proven, leaving the Axeman a faceless phantom in the annals of crime. Was he a lone madman, driven by some inscrutable private psychosis? This theory suggests an individual unhinged from reality, his violence a random outpouring of inner demons. His letter, claiming to be a demon from hell, could support this idea. Or it could have been a calculated ploy to enhance the terror. Or was he part of something larger, something more organized? perhaps a vendetta against Italian grocers, as many of his victims were. This line of thought explores possibilities of organized crime involvement, though the methods and lack of typical gangland motives make this less certain. Some investigators at the time and later researchers suspected specific individuals. Joseph Monfre, for instance, was a man shot and killed in Los Angeles in 1920 by the widow of Mike Pepitone, the Axeman's last victim. She claimed he was the Axeman. Monfre had a history of crime and was reportedly in New Orleans during the attacks. However, conclusive evidence linking him to all the Axeman crimes was lacking. Others whispered of supernatural forces, taking the Axeman's letter at its word, a theory fueled by New Orleans' own rich tapestry of voodoo and spiritualism. The enduring mystery is fueled by the peculiarities of the case, the lack of a clear, consistent motive across all victims, the specific method of entry, the chiseled door panel, the choice of weapon, almost always the victim's own axe, and of course the bizarre demand for jazz music. These elements combine to create a puzzle that has frustrated and fascinated for over a century. The Axeman was not just a killer, he was a performer of terror, and his true identity remains his final, unsettling secret, lost to the shadows of time. Section 9. Echoes in the Music City, the Axeman's lasting legacy. The Axeman's reign of terror was relatively short, spanning primarily from 1918 to 1919. Yet his shadow has loomed long and dark over the city of New Orleans. He transcended the realm of a mere criminal to become a figure of dark legend, a boogeyman whose name could still evoke a shiver decades later. His story became woven into the rich, complex folklore of a city already steeped in tales of ghosts, pirates, and mysterious happenings. The Axeman carved his niche in this tapestry with a bloodied axe and a chilling, unforgettable demand. He became a cautionary tale whispered about in hushed tones, a reminder of a time when fear walked the streets with impunity. Parents might have used his name to frighten misbehaving children, a local specter far more terrifying than any generic monster. The details of his crimes, particularly the infamous letter and the night jazz supposedly saved the city, ensured his story would not fade easily from collective memory. He represented a period of profound vulnerability and a mystery that gnawed at the city's sense of order and justice, an evil that struck from the darkness and then vanished without a trace. The Axeman's bizarre story, particularly the intersection of music and murder, has inevitably inspired artistic interpretations. Songs have been written, books penned, and plays staged, each attempting to capture the horror and the mystery of those terrifying months. The tale of the night jazz saved New Orleans became an iconic piece of local lore, a testament not just to the fear but also to the unique cultural spirit of the city. It highlighted how New Orleans turned to its most defining art form in a moment of profound crisis. A strange, almost surreal chapter in the history of jazz itself. Ultimately, the Axeman of New Orleans was never caught. His identity remains one of the city's greatest unsolved mysteries, a haunting melody in its rich and often turbulent history. He left behind a legacy of fear, unanswered questions, and a chilling reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface of even the most vibrant and joyful of places. The echoes of his axe and the strains of the jazz played to keep him at bay still resonate in the historical consciousness of the Music City, a dark, unforgettable chapter in its story.